Hi guys, it's Duncan here from Candle Shack. Just here to give you a really important announcement today about Augeo and our vegan diffuser base. Some of you might have heard through the grapevine that there has been some changes in the classification of the material that's sold under the brand name Augeo, and we sell a vegan version of this exact same molecule called vegan diffuser base. So what's effectively happened is, because Augeo has been such a successful diffuser base, it's reached a threshold at which point it had to undergo additional testing in line with REACH regulations. And this has triggered a slight concern. So the manufacturer of Augeo have self-classified, which means the labelling on the Augeo will change and the safety data sheet will change. So I'll go into a presentation in a moment where I'll talk you through in some detail what this change means and the amount of ambiguity and uncertainty over it, because effectively what's happened is they've done a test, they're not particularly comfortable with the results, so they're going to retest, and only once this is completed towards the end of this year will an official classification for Augeo and vegan diffuser base be issued, which, as I say, will be towards the end of this year. However, because the particular warning is H361D, which I'll talk about in a second, the onus is on the manufacturer, once they become aware of this, to actually communicate that to downstream customers, even whilst we wait for an official classification. So this, unfortunately, as we head into peak season and Christmas, creates a wee bit of uncertainty for us. So without further ado, let me talk you through in some detail what's happened, the context, and what you need to do. 2,2-dimethyl-1,3-dioxylane for methanol, CAS number 100-79-8. Navigating the recent reclassification of our diffuser and mist base. Introduction. The purpose of this presentation, we're here to shed light on the recent reclassification of our diffuser and mist base. Our commitment is to ensure safety and compliance with regulations. Our approach has always been one of transparency and open communication with our customers, hence this presentation. And we should point out, as a disclaimer, this presentation is based on Candle Shack's current understanding of the situation using the information provided by our suppliers. We do recommend consulting with regulatory expert or legal counsel for advice specific to your situation. So what is REACH and the testing process? REACH is a European Union regulation for the safe use of chemicals ensuring the protection of human health and the environment. Testing under REACH. When a substance breaches a certain production volume threshold, it triggers additional testing requirements. These tests are designed to assess the potential impacts of the substance on human health and on the environment. Specifically, in this case, the substance we call Augeo and vegan diffuser base, so to be clear, this is any chemical with the CAS number 100-79-8. This underwent a development study on rabbits in line with OECD 414. This is a standard test for assessing the potential for a substance to cause developmental toxicity. The results: adverse effects on development were observed at the highest dosage for the first time, leading to the reclassification of the substance. The next steps are that the reclassification has triggered additional scientific studies to clarify these unexpected results. These studies will be conducted later this year. The reclassification and understanding self-classification. So the new classification is H361D, suspected of damaging fertility or the unborn child. Please note this classification applies to a chemical material and not just Augeo, which is a brand name. So it will affect Augeo Crystal, Augeo and vegan diffuser base, and anything else with CAS number 100-79-8. Self-classification. So this is a process where the manufacturer or importer of a substance or mixture determines the hazard classification of the substance or mixture according to the criteria set out in CLP regulation. In this case, the manufacturer has self-classified the substance based on the test results that I mentioned before. Classification in legislation is different. This is when a substance is officially classified as hazardous according to legislation, often following a formal review process by a regulatory body. These classifications are legally binding and must be adhered to by all manufacturers and importers. So what's the difference? Self-classification allows for more immediate action based on new data, while classification in legislation is a more formal, often slower process. Both are important parts of ensuring the safety of chemicals. I should highlight once again that the result of the OECD 414 study was highly unexpected by Solvay. The test results were not anticipated based on previous studies, leading to the self-classification. This does mean that the product could be reclassified again later this year following retesting. The upcoming test and what it entails. So the purpose of the upcoming test is designed to confirm or refute the initial test results that led to the reclassification. In terms of process, the retesting will likely involve repeating the development study on rabbits, OECD 414, or similar tests, possibly with different dosages or conditions. It may also involve testing on different species to compare results. Mechanistic studies. These are additional studies aimed at understanding the biological mechanisms that led to the observed effects. These studies can help clarify whether the effects are likely to occur in humans and under what conditions. In terms of timing, the retesting is scheduled for later this year. The exact timeline will depend on the specifics of the tests being conducted. So what about the potential outcomes? Depending on the results of the retesting, the classification of the substance could be confirmed or it could be reversed. This will be determined based on whether the adverse effects observed in the initial tests are replicated. Period of uncertainty and alternatives. So the current situation. There's no doubt we are in a period of uncertainty until the new test results are available. We think they'll be about October or November in 2023, so later this year. The classification could be confirmed or it could be reversed back to the current labelling. So our commitment is that we will keep you updated as new information becomes available. In terms of your options, while we hope the classification will be reversed, we understand that the H361D classification may be concerning. If you prefer, you can consider using alternative bases for your products. In terms of alternative bases, one common option is perfumer's alcohol, which is primarily composed of ethanol. It is a commonly used base in the fragrance industry. Bioethanol is an alternative which is extremely similar to perfumer's alcohol, just a different source. Very much in the same way as with Augeo and vegan diffuser base, same kind of material, just sourced from different sources. With bioethanols, they can, however, have a bit of an odour, which may not be desirable for all fragrances. What we tend to do in our contract manufacturing business is use perfumer's alcohol, as it's a more neutral base. Safety of the product for intended use. So on safety, the product remains safe for use in diffusers and room mists, and here's why. The route of exposure. The adverse effects observed in the tests were associated with oral ingestion of the substance at high dosages. In typical use of diffusers and room mists, the substance is not ingested, especially not at high doses. In addition, there was also previous studies. Previous studies on the substance did not show the adverse effects observed in the recent test. The upcoming retesting will help clarify these unexpected results. In terms of the new label, products containing greater than or equal to 3% of the substance will carry the new classification label, at least in the European Union. It may be lower than this in the United States. This is a precautionary measure in line with CLP regulations and does not mean the product is unsafe for its intended use. So in terms of compliance, we are committed to ensuring our products are safe and compliant with all relevant regulations, which is why, for the time being, we will continue to sell this product. Understanding the risk and customer perception. So the risk associated with the substance is linked to ingestion at high dosages, as I've already said. And once again, in typical use of diffusers and room mists, the substance is not ingested, and especially not at high dosages. CLP labels, it's important to note that CLP indicates hazards and not product-specific risks. They're designed to inform about the potential dangers and hazards of a substance, not to assess the likelihood of these dangers occurring under normal use conditions in different products. Customer perception is important here. The new CLP label could lead to concerns or misconceptions among customers, even though the product does remain safe for its intended use. This is a commercial risk rather than a chemical risk in some ways, given the use case. So our role, we are committed to providing clear, accurate information to help you understand the situation and to make informed decisions. And as a valued customer, we encourage you to reach out with any questions or concerns that you have. We are here to support you and will answer any questions that we can. So flexibility within regulations and selling of pre-labelled stock. So different companies may respond differently to self-classification. This is due to the grey area in the CLP regulations which allow for some interpretation, particularly on timelines. Selling pre-labelled stock. Our suppliers have chosen to sell through their existing stock with the current labels. This is actually a common approach within the industry when a reclassification occurs, as it can prevent manufacturers and suppliers having material in their warehouse with different CLP label compared to the actual label on the product. So why is this okay in some instances? The reclassification is based on new test results, but previous tests and usage have not indicated a safety concern for the intended use of the product. Therefore, existing stock, which is already in the supply chain, can still be sold under the old classification. The SDS is, however, going to be updated, and once the pre-labelled stock is sold out, the suppliers will start providing updated safety data sheets with the new classification for all stock entering the supply chain. So what's Candleshack's approach? Well, our suppliers will continue to send us pre-labelled IBCs, so these are 1-ton pallets containing these materials. We will ourselves begin to relabel new production immediately as we decant this bulk liquid into smaller packs, so we have the opportunity to relabel at that point. However, as we have a fair amount of finished stock in the warehouse that's already labelled, some of which is being sold today and was sold yesterday and will be sold tomorrow, we will continue to sell this through. Therefore, there will necessarily be a period of crossover where products with both the old and new labels will be in circulation. We are committed to ensuring a smooth transition and will keep you informed about any changes to the product labels or the SDS. What this means for you. So current stock. Whilst we move existing stock through the supply chain with the original labelling, you can continue to use your existing safety data sheets. On new stock, once the newly labelled product arrives, we will provide an updated safety data sheet. You will need to use these updated safety data sheets for your safety and compliance records. In terms of relabelling, if you wish to continue selling products containing the reclassified substance, you will need to update your product labels to reflect the new classification. This is a requirement under CLP regulations. We have already started to update Diffuser safety data sheets and will update the CLP label tool as soon as possible. Tactile warning labels. Products classified as H361D sold to the general public require a tactile warning label. This is also true for products containing perfumer's alcohol or other flammable bases, so going forward, it looks like most diffusers and room mists will require tactile warnings. Tactile warning labels are simply clear labels with embossed triangles, and they can be purchased from various sources including Amazon. Their sole purpose is to enable people with limited visibility to detect the fact that a material or a product they're handling has a hazard such as H361D. In terms of safety, the product remains safe for its intended use. The new classification is based on high dosage ingestion, which is not a typical route of exposure for diffusers and room mists. And in terms of support, Candleshack understand that these changes may require adjustments in your business operations, and we are here to support you through this process and answer any questions that you may have. So questions and support. Candleshack operates an open door policy, so we do welcome your questions and concerns. I should point out we don't have all of the answers at the moment, but we'll do the best we can to answer any questions you may have. Contact us through the normal customer support channels and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And just in terms of our commitment, we are here to help you, support you through this change, as we understand as we move towards peak season, this is an unwelcome development. So in conclusion, safety is our top priority and the safety of our customers. In terms of transparency, we are committed to keeping you informed about changes to our products. We appreciate this may be concerning and frustrating, particularly given the uncertainty over the new tests that are happening later this year and the confusion of having materials in the supply chain with different labels and safety data sheets. What we would say is not to panic, as Augeo has not changed. So this is above all a precautionary measure whilst retesting is conducted and the materials remain perfectly safe in normal use. The biggest risk remains customer perception, as H361D, whatever way we look at it, is not a pleasant warning on a consumer product, especially without context. Thank you. We do appreciate your understanding and patience during this time. There's two particular questions that I suspect we'll get, so I'll take the liberty of answering them now. The first obvious question is, why has the manufacturer not waited until retesting has been completed? So the current relabelling is happening because of the self-classification process. Self-classification is a proactive measure taken by manufacturers or importers when new data about a product's substance's potential hazard comes to light. It's a way to ensure that most current information about a substance's hazard is communicated to users even before, as in this case, a formal regulatory classification has been completed. In this case, the recent tests on the material showed potential developmental toxicity at high doses, leading to the self-classification of the substance as H361D, which is suspected of damaging fertility or the unborn child. As a result, manufacturers and importers are updating their labels and safety data sheets to reflect this new self-classification. However, this self-classification is not the final word on the substance's hazards. The upcoming retesting will provide additional data that could confirm or refute the initial test results. If the retesting shows that the substance does not pose a developmental toxicity hazard, the self-classification could well be reversed and the labels in SDS would be updated once again. It's important to note that this process of data collection, hazard assessment, classification and communication is iterative and designed to ensure that safety information keeps pace with scientific understanding. It's all part of the commitment to ensuring the safe use of chemicals and protecting human health and the environment. The second question will invariably be, what should I do? So our advice to customers would be to start planning for relabeling as soon as possible. However, our view based on industry norms would be to continue selling through your existing stock with the old labels in the meantime. Once the new labels are available to you and your existing stock is sold out, you should start distributing products with the new labels. We would not recommend recalling or relabeling your finished goods. The decision on whether to update your labels on new stock that you make now before you receive relabeled base material is your decision based on your interpretation of CLP legislation. We cannot answer this for you, unfortunately. However, as outlined earlier, different businesses will take different views, particularly given the low risk of the hazard occurring in normal use. Had the testing suggested the exposure route was inhalation, for example, the industry-wide response would have been very different and for good reason. That said, the correct procedure is to relabel whilst we await a final classification, so you should not just ignore the self-classification, but implement it as soon as it is possible. It's also important to keep in mind that the OECD 414 trial is imminently being retested, so the self-classification could potentially be reversed in the near future, perhaps later this year. Therefore, you might want to stay updated on the situation and be prepared to adjust your plans as necessary. In summary, whilst there is uncertainty over the final classification of this material, we feel it would be foolish to write it off as it is an exceptional diffuser base, and the fact the supplier is doing some very expensive retesting suggests there is some doubt over the results. So the decision would be whether to 1. Relabel and continue to use the material, acknowledging the new labelling requirements, or 2. Switch to an alternative base, either temporarily or permanently. Should you decide to move to another base, as outlined in the earlier presentation, Perfumer's alcohol would be an excellent choice. Okay, so there we have it, guys. That's the information as we have it at the moment. I know this is not the best of news as we head into peak season. Most of you will already have formulated your reed diffusers, and if you're using Augeo or vegan diffuser base, I understand this is probably quite concerning. So as I outlined right at the end of the slideshow there, you've got a couple of decisions practically. If we talk absolute, in practical terms, you've got a couple of choices here. Choice 1 is that you continue to use Augeo as a diffuser base whilst we wait for the final classification. So this may mean that you have to apply tactile warnings and more hazardous labelling to your diffusers in the short term, at least until we get an answer before the end of this year. If you decide that's not for you because you think your customers are going to look at these labels, take one look and say, not for me, thanks. The alternative really is to switch base. Now you can either switch base permanently or move back to Augeo, seeing as you have your recipes, if it gets reclassified in November or December this year. If you do move to an alternative base, we've got an awful lot of recipes for Perfumer's alcohol. Perfumer's alcohol is a fantastic base used by many big brands. It also requires tactile warnings because of the flammability, if you're selling it to consumers, that is. So it's not really a great deal of wins as we move forward. You either need a base that's flammable and has tactile warnings, which includes the bioethanols that some other people are starting to push out into the market, or you use Augeo, which either temporarily or permanently will require tactile warnings too. So that's the news as we understand it right now. Of course, we will be speaking to the supply chain. We'll be watching with quite a lot of curiosity these new tests that happen later in the year. And as soon as we get more information, we'll pass it on to you. What we will be doing proactively is we will be updating the safety data sheets based on the information as has been passed to us. And we'll also update the Candleshack CLP tool, probably with old and new diffuser bases. So for those of you who do receive newly labelled product, once we start making new batches from today, you will have the CLP information required for your products. That's it. Sorry it's not better news, guys, but that's the truth. So thank you.